Yeah, you read that title, right? And no, this isn't some sort of bizarre dream world you've been plopped into. Despite making about 1,000 videos on Fullmetal Alchemist, I have problems with every version. And even though I've already spent a good deal of time complaining, I still have some assorted complaints that just didn't really fit anywhere else in this series. So before I wrap up this 10,000 part video series, I figured I should spend a bit of time going over all that stuff that I don't really like about one of my favorite stories. Before going into my issues with 2003, I want to start with MANGAHOOD. The reason is simple enough. I have a lot more to discuss with 2003. That's right, after 100,000 videos in this series, I'm finally discussing my major issues with 2003. But first, MANGAHOOD. My first issue comes in the form of convenient plot points. Now, none of these things are plot holes or things that have no explanation. They're just things that I feel aren't adequately explained in the story itself, or that feel rather unsatisfying to me. For example, fairly early on in the story, Ed, Al, and Alex just happen to run into Marco, who happens to have incredibly important information about the Philosopher's Stone that will help the boys along their journey. It's not like this couldn't happen, but it sure is convenient. I can't help but feel that it would have been better for Ed and Al to end up actively searching him out instead of just stumbling upon him like this. A bit later on, Ed and Al also simply happen to stumble upon Ling, who happens to be looking for the secret of immortality. Again, a case where I would have preferred if Ling was actively searching for them with more purpose, or if Ed and Al were looking for him when they heard rumors of someone looking for the secret. Similarly, Barry happening to run into Hawkeye right as they need information from him, that's pretty convenient. However, the bigger issues come as the story moves along. First, Marco uses his knowledge of alchemy to destroy Envy's Philosopher's Stone. Fair enough that he knows how to do this, but afterward it begs the question, why didn't he teach someone else how to do this? Or if he couldn't do that, why didn't he try using this on Pride later? Of course, there are potential answers people could come up with, but there isn't an answer provided in the story itself. Instead, it feels like this plot point was put in the story because the group needed to capture Envy here so other things could happen later. So this was used without fully considering how it would impact later events or the overall logic of how the homunculi are dealt with. But the largest issue I have with these convenient plot points easily comes from Father's plan itself. I mean, what is Father doing here? He needs all these human sacrifices and they're incredibly precious resources, yet he still just lets them run around doing whatever? Beyond the fact that this allows them to actively oppose him, what if something bad happened to them? I get that he views humans as ants, and that means he might not view them as enough of a threat to even care about what they're doing, but he should care about them getting hurt themselves. Really, at a point, it's hard for me to understand why he doesn't try to keep them tied up under Central, waiting for the promised day. Again, even if Father's weaknesses as a character can help me come up with some sort of reasons for his actions here, I would have preferred if the story focused a bit more on this. As it stands, I'm not a big fan of it, and it's one of these things that's always in the back of my mind, bugging me like, Father, just be smart, please, I'm begging you. Next up, problems with characterization. There really aren't many of these. In fact, it's impressive how few complaints I have, considering how many characters there are and the length of the story. However, there are a few moments where characters' actions feel kinda strange to me, where I don't really buy what they're doing, or where I feel there was missed opportunities to delve deeper into the characters' personalities and experiences. For example, there's this moment where Martel is killed inside Al. The fact this causes him to regain his memories of the gate has always been a bit confusing to me, and stands as one of those contrivances I was talking about. But more importantly here, Al's reaction to this is so toned down. Like, when it happens, he seems understandably panicked and upset, but then he moves on so quickly. Sure, this definitely impacts his actions later, when he talks about refusing to let anyone else get hurt. But overall, I think we could have gotten more of him being really upset about this, seen more of his emotional state following such a disturbing event. Instead, he simply moves on, and the plot pushes forward with him mostly acting as he normally does. Later on, there's another part where all these characters are together and they agree to let May take Envy back to her country as a way to appease the Emperor and save her clan. I can definitely understand their desire to help her, but this has always felt mind-numbingly stupid to me. Of course, just because characters make a decision I disagree with doesn't make that a flaw, but I personally don't think the characters discuss this nearly enough. After all, what if the Emperor chose to use Envy for evil means? Well, I guess they're assuming that Envy has no more power left, but that seems like a very foolish assumption for these characters to make. Naturally, some people will feel this is within the realm of reason while others won't. but this has always struck me as reckless in a way that doesn't suit this group of characters. Then, finally, there's the whole human sacrifice plot with Mustang. I already mentioned that Father letting the characters run around was a bit hard for me to buy, but this is by far the most ridiculous with Mustang. The reasoning provided is clear enough. Mustang is a potential human sacrifice because he has the ability to open the portal of truth. Okay, fair enough. But there's something strange about this. Mainly, there's the question of what makes someone a candidate for human sacrifice. Throughout the story, the implication is that the individual must be a powerful alchemist. After all, Ed, Al, and Marco are among them. Later, though, we learn that people can only be used as sacrifices if they've seen the truth. So, in that case, why are characters like Marco and Mustang considered? I presume it's because in order to successfully open the gate, they would need to have a phenomenal understanding of alchemy that very few people possess. Alright, this all makes sense so far. But then Mustang gets forced through the gate and everything gets kinda messy. If characters can be forced to open the gate, keeping someone like Mustang alive makes a lot less sense now. After all, he learned a whole lot about what was going on fairly early into the plot, and from there represented a threat, or at least an obstruction, to Father's goal. In this light, it seems like Mustang was kept alive simply because he was needed for the plot, rather than that it really made sense to keep him alive at this point. In Chapter 52, Mustang even asks why he's being kept alive, to which Bradley replies, "To make you realize how deep the waters are you've been swimming in." So maybe this could be viewed as Bradley's big weakness, that he wants to see Mustang and others suffer and struggle, that that's the only way his wrath can be satiated. Beyond that, I've already discussed his desire to be in conflict with others in previous videos, so perhaps Bradley didn't want to wipe out an adversary at this point. Still though, that explanation doesn't quite satisfy me. I'd want something a bit more, just a bit more of a focus on why Father is taking such a hands-off approach, and on why Mustang is being allowed to run around, and on why, if they wanted to force Mustang through the gate or force him to open the portal, why didn't they focus more on this earlier? Why didn't they kill his friends along the way in an effort to convince him to open the portal, instead of right before they need him? This whole plan feels rather slapped together for something that was in the works for so long, and that so many people had their fingers in. Well, that's it. My main complaints about MANGAHOOD. All in all, not that much stuff here, and none of it really gets in the way of me enjoying this story thoroughly. But now we're on to the bigger part of this video, and that is Episode 26 of 2003 has to be one of my least favorite sections of Fullmetal Alchemist across any version of the story. Why? Because it takes the chapters it's adapting, removes and alters my favorite parts, and replaces them with an abysmal Winry plot that I just can't stand. Of course, this is the Rush Valley section of the story. First though, I need to briefly discuss Rush Valley as it's presented in MANGAHOOD. Overall, this is where we see Winry's strengths as a character. We see her passion for automail, her desire to become a better engineer so she can help Ed on his quest, her wisdom when she tells Panina to stop stealing stuff and tells her that Dominic gave her her legs so she could do better things than that, her capability and level-headedness when she delivers this baby. Along with that, she opens up Ed's pocket watch without realizing what's hidden in there, that a bit of his trauma has been etched inside it. But she still opens up to him about the fact that she saw this and discusses it with him. Basically, she does the best thing she can do after having made this mistake. After that, she steals her resolve even more, and manages to find an automail instructor who will teach her how to improve. Much like Ed, she's unwilling to let her ability stagnate. She wants to become better because she wants to help them, because she cares about these boys so much, and because she's just passionate about her craft. All in all, I came away from this section of the story liking her a whole lot. However, 2003 uses this Rush Valley section for the opposite purpose. Instead of highlighting Winry's strengths, it highlights Winry's weaknesses. Here, Ed's goaded into an arm wrestling contest, and as soon as they insult his automail, Winry eggs him on. Since these arm wrestling guys are cheating and scamming people, Ed cheats as well and uses alchemy to win. But Winry doesn't know this right away. Even so, she learns soon enough when these con artists confront Ed. Now, her being upset makes sense. After all, she wants her automail to be useful to Ed, to help him on his journey. So seeing it help him succeed? Well, that would be extremely validating. Learning that she misunderstood the situation would be upsetting, but her reaction and the way it's framed is bizarre and makes her so unlikable to me. First, she sort of goes into her comedic violence mode, where she hits people and the art style changes, But the art style doesn't completely change and the serious music remains, making this section come across pretty badly. Here, it seems like she's just the sort of person who resorts to violence to solve her problems, even though in the previous section with Al's identity crisis, she was supposed to stand in as someone who shows how important it is to use words to solve your problems and connect with other people. But the next thing is what really makes me dislike her. See, 2003 Winry already knows the secret inside Ed's pocket watch. She saw it earlier, which means that she knows that this is an incredibly personal object that contains a piece of his trauma. So what does she do here? Well, she steals it from Ed and gives it to Panina, so he'll have to chase her around and respect her automail, I guess. What a horrible overreaction and what a terrible thing to do. Weaponizing Ed's trauma to force him to chase someone else is just really messed up. And this is only made worse by the fact that I can compare this directly to MANGAHOOD's versions of events and go, oh wow, she's really nice here, and then she's just a total jerk over here. Anyway, following this, Ed gets his pocket watch back and talks about how he can't let anyone else beat him as far as his automail is concerned, and sentimental music comes in and all that jazz. I guess this is supposed to be the moment where they come to some sort of understanding, but instead, to me, it makes Winry look more ridiculous. Here, Ed uses his words to tell Winry how great her automail is, despite the fact that she stole his pocket watch. And it makes Winry seem more ridiculous because she could have just talked to Ed about this. I mean, he's clearly willing to talk. Now, I'm fine with characters making mistakes and all that, but again, Winry's actions here are such obvious overreactions, and the implications of her stealing the pocket watch really don't feel like they were fully considered. Of course, I understand that this section couldn't have been kept exactly the same as it was in MANGAHOOD though. After all, Ed and Al already helped deliver a baby in 2003. So the creators probably wanted to put something else here so that they wouldn't weirdly repeat themselves. But this whole alteration to the Rush Valley section of the story, not the something else I was hoping for at all. Well, that's enough complaining about one episode. Now it's time to complain about some broader stuff. And much like with MANGAHOOD, I've got some contrivances to complain about. These contrivances mainly start piling up once 2003 goes in its own direction. First off, there's this whole Juliet Douglas plot. For those who haven't seen the show in a while, Juliet Douglas is allegedly the soldier who started the Ishval War by shooting a child. After her death, Sloth uses her name to sneak into the Amestrian military and take on the role of Bradley's secretary. Eventually, Hughes figures this out, and that's what leads to his death. But the question I always had was, why Juliet Douglas? Why this name? Why such a high-profile soldier, someone who's said to play such a central role in the Ishval conflict? Couldn't they have used someone else's name, someone who wouldn't have a whole Wikipedia article on them if you looked it up? Or couldn't Sloth have slipped into the military in some other way? All in all, it just doesn't make much sense to me, and it feels like such an odd decision that I can't see it as anything other than a contrived way of getting Hughes to realize something's wrong with Sloth. Following this, a smaller contrivance pops up when Azumi breaks into Ed's hospital room while Mustang and the gang are there and they just don't follow up on that. To me, it's not a huge deal, but still, kinda weird. But then these moments start piling up, and it gets harder and harder to brush them under the rug. Most of these problems come right towards the end of the series, from episodes 46 onward. Regardless of how much I love this series, and regardless of the fact that some of my favorite moments also occur in these episodes, I still dislike how a lot of things were handled. Most of these issues come in the form of questions I can ask. Like, how did Lust, Sloth, and Wrath find where Ed and Al are staying here? After all, there's no point where they would have been able to learn their location. Then, how did Ed fix his automail arm after it broke? When his arm previously broke, he needed to go to Winry for help, but now he claps them hands and gets moving. Maybe this arm is supposed to be weaker than what Winry makes, but it sure doesn't seem like it, considering that he's able to make it into a full-on gun. Later, how did Azumi know Ed and Al were in this factory? I mean, Ed had met with Azumi before he learned Al went there, and they never show him give her a call or anything like that. One that particularly bothers me is that the Tringhams happen to get arrested and taken to jail just before Ed breaks into the same building, and whoa, the Tringhams have a note from their father's journal that provides Ed with the exact info he needs to find Dante. It would have been nicer at this point if Ed took on a more active role and figured out how to find her of his own accord somehow. Also, after Ed gets transported to the other side of the gate, it feels like quite the coincidence that the Zeppelin lands on him. The strange part here is that it would have felt a lot more appropriate if the otherworld Ed had just died in a firebombing or something more large scale, instead of a freak accident taking him out, and yet they still chose to go with the freak accident. Meanwhile, Rosa's state in this final set of episodes has always confused me. I always assume Dante slipped something in her drink, but she snaps out of it as soon as Ed gets stabbed, but not when her baby's getting tossed around like a hot potato? Okay, I guess. It's possible that the drug just happened to wear off as soon as Ed was stabbed, but to me it always gave the sense that Rose reacts more to Ed's suffering than to her baby getting tossed around, which feels kinda weird for her character. Beyond that, I can understand why Mustang wanted to go after Bradley, but it's harder to understand what exactly his whole plan was here. He locks Bradley in this room with him, and then... what? I can understand why he'd act recklessly, but it's harder to believe that Hawkeye would let him go through with such a haphazard plan. Then, most importantly, what is Dante doing during these last episodes? Of course, she has her plan to use Al's Philosopher's Stone to transfer into Rose's body, and then she wants to get it on with Ed, so yeah, that's something special right there. Makes enough sense though. From here, she casts Ed through the gate. Now, it's important to recognize that at this point, Al doesn't know where Ed is, so he doesn't know that Ed has been sent to the other side. However, when Ed comes back through the gate, Al is there, and he sees Ed. Now that Al knows he's here, things have changed. Because if Dante kills Ed, what's to stop Al from using the Philosopher's Stone? From using the very power source she needs? I mean, maybe this alchemic circle underneath him is supposed to be a restraint, but it clearly doesn't end up working out that way, so I'm not sure. Either way though, killing Ed now is exceptionally strange. Instead, shouldn't she use his life as leverage? The best justification for her actions I can come up with is that because she's such a self-centered person, and because she has such a low opinion of other people, she can't imagine Al sacrificing himself for Ed. Alternatively, it's possible she thought she could use her alchemic abilities to overpower the Philosopher's Stone. Maybe she's just that prideful or something like that. But if either of these things are the case, or if both of them are, I would have wanted more focus on those ideas. However, I've conveniently skirted over a bigger issue I have.
Termin-Archer.
I'm trying to avoid any sort of contact with my eyes with this thing.
Sometimes I remember that Termin-Archer exists, and I just get a little bit sad. Like, I'll be doing a watch through of 2003 because I watch this show a lot. It's one of my favorites. And Termin-Archer's ugly mug pops onto the screen, and I go, oh no, I forgot about you. But I never truly forgot. He's always lurking in the back of my mind, gnawing at my brain. Termin-Archer. There are so many things to complain about with this. Just, why? Archer before was a fine enough villain, I guess. He existed to show a member of the military who cares about nothing more than gaining more power, and just becomes this warmongering monster. And that's a good thing for Ed to have to face in this series, since he's constantly coming to terms with different ideas of morality and what's right and wrong and what he should do and how he can navigate these situations. So coming up against someone like this, someone he probably isn't going to be able to make a satisfactory deal with, I like that idea a lot. Either way though, I'm going a bit off topic. I'm trying to ignore the biggest problem, which is that he becomes Termin-Archer. Having this goofy, ridiculous robot man appear near the end of the series, as things are getting darker and more depressing and more serious. Why? Why? First off, how does he exist? I didn't know that they had this sort of technology. I guess maybe this is part of some sort of secret military project? Maybe some of the Philosopher's Stone was used for it, but why would you use it for that? I don't know. Either way, even if that is the case, it's not provided in the story. He just appears as Termin-Archer, and he's there, and he's running around, and the craziest thing is, he doesn't really do anything. He appears, runs up, shoots Mustang in the eye, and then Mustang's fine. So all he really does, I guess, is hurt Mustang. But he hurts Mustang in a way that Mustang could have just been hurt by Bradley. In fact, it probably would have worked better to have Bradley hit Mustang in the eye, slice it or something, and just do it that way. Bradley could be the one who takes out one of his eyes. But no, Termin-Archer kind of just walks up and does it, and it makes the whole scene a little bit goofier, just a little bit stupider. Now, despite all these complaints, it might be surprising to know that I like the end of the TV series. Actually, I kind of love it despite how messy it is. Of course, I guess I already had my expectations lowered since I'd already heard about how bad it apparently was. Either way though, my personal experience was largely positive, and as the music swelled and the credits rolled, I could confidently say that I was satisfied with the ending. I liked the open-ended nature of it. To me, it felt like a fitting conclusion to Ed and Elle's journey, even if it was incredibly sad. I didn't need there to be any more, and I'd seen a series that I enjoyed at least as much as Brotherhood. Over the course of my next video, I will go over why I love the ending, but for now, all that's important to know is that I did love it, and that I didn't feel the need for the story to continue. But even then, I knew that this wasn't really the end. No, there was the follow-up film, The Conqueror of Shamballa. Still, I didn't watch it for at least a month because, well, I was satisfied. Continuing the story felt wrong to me, and I was worried that somehow the movie would tarnish this series, this ending, that I was actually really fond of. So did it? Well, yes, no, maybe? Honestly, it's hard to say, because I'm incredibly conflicted about The Conqueror of Shamballa. See, I like most of the ideas present here. Ed being hyper-focused on his world and slowly becoming less and less hopeful he'll make it back. That's a great direction for his character to go in. A great way to expand on this idea of living in a dream that comes up multiple times throughout 2003. However, I like how Ed's feelings about this are clearly mixed. He still reacts to what's going on around him, he still helps others, and in particular, he connects with Noah, who he can relate to due to her experiences of being othered in this world. Later, the story challenges Ed in a great way when he decides he can't allow the two worlds to connect, since people on this side want to use the other side for their own purposes. Since Ed needs to connect the worlds in order to see Al again, this challenges the very core of his character. He needs to choose between the good of the world and realizing his dream and desires. Meanwhile, Mustang having his rank lowered following his attack on Bradley is an appropriate direction to take his character. After all, at the end of the TV series, Ed told him no one would be able to trust him as a leader if he went through with this plan, regardless of his reasons. Basically, Mustang knew he might lose support of the masses by acting on his own, but he went through with it anyway, and now he has to live with the consequences of that. Al's development is similarly compelling to me. In his desperate pursuit of Ed, he's become a hyper-competent alchemist. Throughout the film, his razor focus on getting Ed back is paired with the other world's Al trying to build this rocket. In both cases, these characters are following their dreams, and in the end, they do things that could harm the rest of the world. Basically, through them, we see how living in a dream can cause people to make horrible mistakes. Regardless of all these good ideas, though, I've always felt that something is missing here. In particular, Izumi, Mustang, and Winry's arcs don't quite feel full to me. For example, we see Mustang all depressed, and then he comes back to Central to fight. Both of these moments work, but what about the time between? Yeah, we can assume that Mustang found the will to fight, but it would have been nice to see that. This way we get the beginning and end of an arc, but the middle is oddly missing. Meanwhile, Izumi just dies between the show and the movie, so her character doesn't really get a proper send-off. Then Winry. Winry just doesn't get much to do here. Sure, she's clearly upset and hoping for Ed's return, but then she gets left behind and... I don't know. I've always been left feeling that she got kinda discarded by the film, that she wasn't really useful for the purposes of what it was trying to do, and that her arc was never completed. So after thinking about this movie a lot more and watching it way too many times, I decided to go look up who worked on the movie. In particular, who directed it and who wrote the script for it. I thought that maybe some people who hadn't been as involved in the TV series had worked on this. But nope. The writer for the movie is Sho Aikawa, who also wrote many of 2003's standout episodes, as well as the entire final stretch of episodes from 39 to 51. Meanwhile, the series director, Seiji Mizushima, returned for the movie. This was somewhat surprising to me. These same people played a major role in creating anime original content I loved, but in the movie, so much of what I loved was missing. Of course, I wanted to know why. And fortunately, there are some answers available to us. In fact, a surprising number of answers. Specifically, the scenario book for The Conqueror of Shamballa contains some stuff from the prototype of the script, and many of the scenes or ideas that were cut out are intact here. But it's only in Japanese, and I haven't yet leveled up enough as an anime YouTube man to read that. Still, there's no need to worry, because a hero emerges before us by the name of Sinnespiel. I probably said that wrong, but either way, you're still a hero. Because they've translated a whole bunch of the stuff, including cut sections of the script and notes left behind by the film's creators. Before reading the script, I only had a vague sense of what I felt the movie was missing. But after reading it, everything seemed a whole lot clearer. Before I said that it felt like Mustang, Azumi, and Winry had been kinda left behind. Well, that's because they were. Originally, they were going to have a lot more content. First, Azumi wasn't going to die off screen. Instead, we were going to get her death scene. In this scene, Azumi is on her last legs, and she's talking with Winry about Al's focus on getting Ed back. After a bit, Wrath shows up, and she reaches out to him, calling him her son. But he tries to leave, saying that homunculi don't have mothers, that they're nothing more than fake lives made from alchemy. However, Winry implores him to stay, so Azumi gets to wrap him in a hug, and says that she'll give him a life, and then dies like that. It's a great send-off for her character, focuses more on Winry's effect on Wrath, and also really moves Wrath in the correct direction for him to end up helping Ed and Al. In my opinion, an even more important scene occurs later when Mustang goes to visit Hughes' grave when he's called back into Central. Hawkeye's there too, and she tries to encourage Mustang to come back to the military, to come back to Central permanently, and work as an alchemist there. But Mustang just says that he doesn't have any right, and that he feels he can't serve in the military anymore. As such, we see that it's not just that he's being punished by the higher-ups for what he did, he's kind of punishing himself. And as he's walking away from the grave, he happens to run into Winry. Of course, there's some awkwardness between them, but they still talk to one another. And Mustang basically says that he's leaving the military. Winry's response here is incredibly important. She challenges him and asks him how he can abandon his dreams so readily. After all, he had wanted to stand at the top of the military, to change the nation, to make sure another war wouldn't break out. But now, he's just gonna give up. In this way, despite the fact that Mustang killed her parents, Winry encourages him to move forward, in a way that's not all that different from how Ed encouraged Rose to move forward, all the way back in the second episode of this series. It's a wonderful moment that fills in the gaps for Mustang's character arc in the film, while also giving Winry a lot more to do, and I'd even say this serves as an effective end for her character arc. She's grown so much, and even if I still would have liked a bit more, this definitely does a lot of good for her. To me, even just these scenes would have gone a long way in fleshing out the film, and in making it a serviceable conclusion for the whole cast. Evidently, Aikawa agrees with some of this, since according to the notes in the prototype script, he particularly wanted to keep some of Mustang's scenes in. Beyond that, there are also certain plot contrivances or confusing moments that would have benefited from more time and a slower pace. For example, Ed was originally supposed to be taken prisoner when Noah went to help Eckhart open the door to Shamballa. However, in the final movie, Fritz Lang breaks through a wall and gets him. This was apparently done because they wanted the film to keep a fast pace going into the final stretch. But it left me wondering how Fritz would know his location at that moment, and how he managed to break through at just the right time. It also results in this moment where Ed jumps out of a plane, crashes through a window, and bounces upon landing. I get that Ed's resilient, but this totally broke my suspension of disbelief. This is a world where people die from a single gunshot wound. A fall like this should have easily killed him, or even if he was incredibly lucky, injured him so badly that he couldn't move. Similarly, Winry and Sheshka were supposed to end up in this underground city by other means, instead of just collapsing down there when Eckhart comes through the gate. This moment isn't a huge deal, but I was always shocked that they weren't at all hurt. All in all, it gives the sense that these characters are just stumbling through life and death scenarios, somehow holding on to their lives through simple chance, and that makes the moments of danger in this film lack some tension they'd otherwise have. Additionally, the notes in the prototype script reveal that Envy lost his ability to transform after passing through the gate, which is why he still looks like a serpent. On top of that, he's lost his mind too. This also explains why he's just chilling out with Hohenheim in his mouth, and why he only bites down when Hohenheim applies pressure. Unfortunately though, the film doesn't relay that info to the audience at all. In fact, Envy is acting pretty much as he did before entering the gate, as in he still attacks Ed upon seeing him, still gets enraged when he thinks about Hohenheim, and still calls Ed a pipsqueak. At the least, changes to these included scenes should have been made to get across the idea that Envy isn't quite himself anymore. In the end, this scenario book helped me figure out why I feel the way I do about The Conqueror of Shamballa. I felt that it was rushed and bloated because that's kind of what it is. A much longer script that was trimmed down in many places, simply because there wasn't enough time to keep key moments in. Really, it feels a lot like an adaptation of a novel that rushes through a lot of material, even if it does manage to cover the most major story beats. As such, I don't really like The Conqueror of Shamballa, but I also don't hate it. If this were a 13-episode season of anime, it probably would have fared much better. Fortunately though, I enjoy the ending of 2003 and never felt that it needed a continuation all that badly. So this film doesn't really affect my opinion of the TV series all that much. Even so, it's hard not to be disappointed, since I feel that this movie could have made the story even better. Because of that, to me, this movie will always be a massive missed opportunity and an unsatisfying end to Ed and Al's journey together in 2003. Well, those are a bunch of my problems with Fullmetal Alchemist. Again, a lot of complaining was done here, but that doesn't change the fact that every version of this story is wonderful. I love them all, I've watched each of the anime multiple times, and I've read the manga more than I'd like to admit. In case you haven't been able to tell yet, I'm kind of obsessed with it. And besides, it's not like I'm ending things off on a negative note. No, we've got one more video left in this video series, so I hope you'll come back for that one next time. Either way, thank you for watching, and thank you to all my patrons for support. In particular, special thanks to Conrad over there for noticing a couple missteps in my analysis when I released this early to patrons. That was a big help, and saved me the hassle of going, crap, I made a mistake, what do I do now? And I really appreciate that. Thanks again though, and I hope you all have a great day. See you next time. Bye-bye for now.